Now, if you're like me and you grew up watching Indiana Jones on repeat and playing Assassin's Creed just over and over again, then the terms Holy Relic and Nazi conspiracy are major buzzwords for you too. If you're as delusional as me, you might even think you are Indiana Jones, or that you could pull off a leap of faith easy, no problem. Whether or not those delusions are a problem though, that's a question for another day, because the question at hand for today is, what is the Holy Lance? Right, so let's set the scene a little bit. We're on top of Golgotha. Jesus has just been crucified after being scourged and led through the streets to his demise. Not the best day. Our story begins after Jesus had been on the cross for a few hours. Just so happens it was a Friday. Look, the day was getting late and the Roman military isn't exactly known for paying overtime. Adding to the urgency, the next day was Sabbath, and Jewish law says the bodies just can't be on the cross overnight. So naturally, the fellas on duty, they decided to scheme a bit, and they got a bit crafty and decided that they would break the legs of those being crucified. Now you might be thinking it's kind of rude to kick a man while he's down, I mean, especially if he's being crucified. But apparently this speeds up the process of crucifixion, because if you break their legs, they can't actually support themselves on the cross, so they more or less just suffocate. So away they go over to the two thieves that are being crucified next to Jesus and straight up just hobble them. And fun little crucifixion fact, one of the two thieves that was being crucified on the cross next to Jesus was venerated as the saint of prisoners and thieves. And this guy's considered the first guy to enter heaven after Jesus had been crucified. Eventually when they do get to Jesus after the other two guys, they notice that he'd already died. So to make sure he wasn't faking it and, messing around or anything, they get Longinus, who was a Roman soldier, to thrust a spear into the side, just to make sure. Now apparently thrusting spears into people was a pretty solid method in the art of crucifixion. It was even seen as a pretty visionary way of checking if people were still alive. I mean, you could just check their pulse, or stab them, whatever gets you going. Anyways, Longinus pierced the side of Jesus's ribcage and out came just a flow of water and blood. Which, I mean, if he wasn't dead before, chances are he is now. And there's a lot of symbolism and prophecy in the outpouring of blood and water. This is where we get the origin of what they call the Holy Lance, or the Spear of Destiny. From the brutal jab of Longinus' spear, it became more than just a Roman soldier's weapon. It became a relic loaded with meaning, said to hold divine power and influence. Over time, it would get tangled up in the hands of kings, conquerors, holy quests, and even the Nazis, cementing its place as one of history's most mysterious and legendary objects. So apart from being the guy that, killed the Son of God and everything, the name of the Roman soldier that did it is actually completely unknown. Legend has it that he was a blind guy who was healed when a drop of Jesus's blood touched his eyes. Feeling pretty upset after killing the Son of God and everything, he renounced his position in the Roman army and converted to Christianity. And eventually he would find himself in Cappadocia, where he became a monk, and little spoiler alert, things don't exactly work out too well for the guy. After a few years of doing monk shit in modern day Turkey.
Armed with an AK-47, he holds 30 people hostage. He demands to speak with the Prime Minister.
After a few years of chilling as a monk in Cappadocia, he's martyred for his faith. And there are a few accounts of how he was killed, such as being arrested and beheaded by the governor of Cappadocia, or being hunted down by a legion of Pontius Pilate's centurions. But by far the most insane one, and my personal favorite, is being ravaged and beheaded by a mob of angry blind people. Now the story goes that around the year 30 AD, yes, 30, Longinus was healing blind people in Cappadocia and preaching the word of God to all that would hear it. But the local pagans, they didn't like that one bit. So instead of talking it out with the guy, a crowd of murderous blind people straight up attacked him and beheaded the guy. There are certain things in history that are very tragic in the moment, but after a little bit of time become funny. I mean, no thanks or anything for performing miracles, just straight up mauled and beheaded by angry blind people. It's fucking hilarious. Now I know what you're thinking, where's the spear? Now hold on a little bit, alright? We're getting to that. I mean, Longinus may or may not have taken it with him to Cappadocia on his preaching journeys. He was pretty proud of it too, showed it off to absolutely anyone that would see it. Anyone that wouldn't see it. He just showed it off every chance he got. I mean, the guy even incorporated it into his sermons, so much so that it gained holy relic status. Which makes me think that those blind guys definitely killed Longinus so that they could steal that pointy looking stick. And this would probably explain why for over 1,000 years the holy relic just vanishes from the history books. You know, its location is just pretty much a complete mystery, completely left up to speculation. Because who knows where it is, you know, some blind guy may have stolen it, a peasant might have stolen it. Now presumably relics that are associated with martyrs are usually buried with them, but if they're not, they're usually just kept in churches within the region that they did most of their work. And I mean, that would make sense because Cappadocia is super important for early Christianity. So I mean, it could be there, but other than that, there's really no major significant accounts of it showing up. I mean, there are sketchy accounts of Constantine requesting it after the Battle of Milvian Bridge, or supposedly Charlemagne used it to win 47 battles or something. Other people say it remained in Byzantine churches or imperial collections where they would hide it due to invading Arabic forces or general instability. And what's crazy is that over the centuries, multiple relics have claimed to be the Holy Lance, each with their own history. Some say the real lance was taken to Constantinople, others claim it was lost in Cappadocia, and yet another version surfaced in Rome. Because basically, a lot of people over the years have said, oh, no, this is the one, no, this is the one. So no one really knows. But I mean, one lance in particular is pretty hard to dismiss. It is until 1098 that we get our first solid reappearance of the Holy Lance in the history books. This takes place at the Siege of Antioch during the First Crusade. I love talking about the Crusades, man. Every time I talk about them, I get so pumped. It's got to be one of the top 3 moments in history. Surely it goes Punic Wars, Crusades, then World War II. Anyways, it's 1098, and a few years earlier, Pope Urban II amasses an army of farmers and peasants and tells them to retake the Holy Land. And there's not much going on back then, so they head out with pitchforks in hands and literally zero preparation. Actually zero preparation, they didn't even bring enough food. But somehow they managed to get to Antioch fueled by turnips and holy retribution. And they're tasked with taking one of the most fortified cities in the whole Levant. And if they took Antioch, it would give them a major foothold in the area, and would also serve as a staging point for further attacks against Jerusalem. It would also severely weaken Muslim control in the area. Only issue was, they had no siege equipment. So at an all-time low, they gathered their best and brightest within the army, and they decided that the best strategy would be to sit down and just hope for the best. These lunatics just camped outside the walls of Antioch for months on end, just hoping that their citizens would just starve to death before they did. I remember they had literally no food, just full idiotic strategy, and supplies got so low that they resorted to eating their own horses and even their own shoe leather, which they sort of just boiled and chewed on for a bit. And while all this was happening, the citizens of Antioch were still getting regular supplies, because there was a gate at the south side of the city that was just left completely unhampered. It's crazy to think that shit like this actually happened. That could have been me 1,000 years ago, but Instead, I'm just making YouTube videos. Anyways, the last shoes were being boiled and the last thought of cannibalism was crossing their mind when one of the city guards, under the cover of night, let them in, and what ensued is just a massive frontal assault, resulting in an absolute bloodbath, and somehow victory for the Crusader army. Like, could you just imagine standing guard on the walls of Antioch and then just suddenly 1,000 shoeless bumblefucks are charging towards you with weapons made out of like horse bones and stuff? Like, holy shit, that's fucking monsters, dude. They're actual monsters. Now, as the sun was rising on the Crusader army's newly conquered, blood-soaked city, they had taken one of the most heavily fortified cities in the whole Levant, with months of starvation, and were feasting on actual food. It was looking pretty good for them. Only issue is that now they were the ones under siege. An army of 45,000 elite Muslim soldiers had amassed themselves on the outskirts of Antioch. Enter God's most trusted idiot, Peter Bartholomew. They say only when you need him the most, God appears. Crusaders needed a miracle, but instead they got Peter Bartholomew. Now, Peter was a humble monk that tagged along with the Crusader armies and somehow found his way defending Antioch. And around this time, Peter started having visions that St. Andrew appeared to him and said, "The Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side during the Crucifixion, is buried beneath the Church of St. Peter inside Antioch." So this is great news for these guys. They don't have much hope, so immediately they create a massive hole in the foundation of St. Peter's Church. These guys are digging for hours on end, but to no avail, they find nothing. Until Peter, who was sort of just sitting on the sidelines, jumped into the hole and discovered the Holy Lance. This is a massive win for these guys. It's like the equivalent of putting the whole welfare check into a shitcoin and it actually turning out this time. Actually, the fellas, well, the remaining fellas that is, strapped the holy relic to the front of their forces and in a blindingly simple mindset of God wills it, completely bum rushed the Muslim forces with minuscule odds of success. Now, I can't explain what exactly happened out there on that day, but somehow they won. They repelled the Muslim army. Now, hopium is a hell of a drug, and finding a holy Christian relic is pretty good for that, but you can't help but think that something else intervened on that battlefield that day. Now, naturally, high off their win from the Muslim forces and the power of God, this sort of inspired a bit of a cult that revolved around the Holy Lance. Now, the whole thing about this cult was that it claimed that the lance held divine power and could help them win any battle. You can't blame them for thinking that. I mean, holy shit, how did they just win that battle? Now, after a few months, once the Crusaders had started to get settled in Antioch, a few of them called BS on Peter's visions. So he decided to prove them wrong, and the way he decided to prove them wrong was running headfirst into a 50-foot scorching bonfire. Now, the Crusaders said that if Almighty God spoke face to face with this man, let him pass through the fire unhurt. However, if it's a falsehood, may he be burned together with the lance which he will carry in his hand. Now, Peter went into this thing with all the confidence, and I'm sure a lot of the Crusaders were super confident that he'd prevail anyways. But he didn't. He was like horrifically burnt and died a couple days later. Apparently, like, trials of fire were a super common way to just test if people were lying or not. Like, if they survived, apparently it proved that they were telling the truth. And if they didn't, well, I guess they were lying. Like, they really had nothing going on back then. You tell, like, a small lie, and to prove it, they're just like, oh, I don't know, run through that fire. Like, it makes no sense. It's hilarious. Anyways, after Peter's death, the Holy Lance was still around, and it played a pretty important part in the Crusaders' army. It would ultimately inspire them to take Jerusalem, which they did, but now the lance was starting to surpass its reputation as a symbol of Christ's sacrifice, and it had now been distorted into an instrument of power. And after the taking of Jerusalem, the lance goes AWOL again from the history books. I mean, the Vatican had a lance. I mean, of course they do. What don't they have in the archives? Now, the one they have was supposedly taken from the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and they transported that back to Rome after passing through the hands of Constantine. Apparently that's where it resides to this day. Obviously, confirming this is pretty difficult, and whether or not that is the one true lance that helped the Crusaders take Jerusalem, it's not really known. But there is an idea that that lance was taken to Nuremberg in the 1400s, and then later moved to Vienna in 1796 for safekeeping when the French Revolutionary Army had marched on Nuremberg. Which leads us to 1935. I mean, these guys are the quintessential bad guys of history. Like, come on, they are the Empire from Star Wars. These guys are fucking evil. I mean, it's no secret that these guys had some wild ideas, right? So it's not hard to believe that the Nazis had a fascination with occultic beliefs and mystical objects. Now, in 1935, Heinrich Himmler established the Ahnenerbe, which is a branch of the SS dedicated to researching the history of the Aryan race. Now, he believed he was like the spiritual heir to ancient Germanic traditions and occultic powers, which in a nutshell is what these guys were researching day and night, trying to find a way to immortalize themselves and the Aryan race. Dude was a lunatic. Himmler also believed that the modern day SS was a continuation of the Teutonic Knights, naturally leading to the Spear of Destinies, which the Nazis believed could actually help them conquer the world. I mean, Hitler wasn't exactly the hardest guy to persuade, and he isn't exactly known for making great decisions. So in 1938, when the Nazis invaded Austria, they took possession of the Holy Lance, as well as like various other holy relics from Hofburg Palace in Vienna. And then from that point, it was taken back to Nuremberg by the SS, where they more or less buried it in an underground crypt to keep it safe from air raids and anyone really. You might be thinking, Brandon, why did Hitler even give a shit about Christian relics in the first place? And the answer is, I don't know. But supposedly for Hitler, it was more about obtaining it for like power and influence as opposed to like the magical aspects of it. Heinrich Himmler was fucking crazy, dude. Like, I know people think Hitler was off his head and everything, but I think it's understated just how much of a lunatic this guy is. And Himmler was into spooky shit too. He loved to perform rituals with their newly acquired relics. Now, these weirdo rituals were said to invoke power and channel mystical forces. So Himmler would drag Hitler along to these eyes wide shut type rituals at Wewelsburg Palace, which was a castle that they'd converted into like the SS Nazi occult Disneyland. And Wewelsburg Castle, I don't know how you pronounce that. Wewelsburg? It sounds dumb. But Wewelsburg Castle had plans to become like the SS headquarters of the Third Reich, and was said to be a direct mirror of Camelot from the Arthurian legends. He must have been a fan because he even had a round table installed in the castle, as well as building like a hall of supreme leaders and a room just known as the Crypt. And the whole castle is like a complete echo of a madman lost in mystical fantasy. I mean, Himmler's own room was dedicated to the Saxon king Heinrich I, who led a German defense against an invading army in the 10th century. And supposedly, King Heinrich was also said to have possessed the spear. And bit of a fun fact, Himmler actually believed that he was a reincarnation of this guy. Like, he wasn't just a fan, he believed he was the reincarnation of King Heinrich I. Anyways, these rituals took place in the Black Sun Room, which unhelpfully for me is one of the more obscure and mysterious aspects of this Fuhrer fantasy fortress. But on March 31st, 1945, not wanting to let his Camelot fall into enemy hands, Himmler dispatched a special task force to Wewelsburg with orders to destroy it. And they lit it on fire, which more or less destroyed a lot of the castle, but the ceremonial rooms remained intact. Then fast forward a bit to when the Allied forces gave the Nazis what for and marched into Nuremberg, they actually found the bunker that housed the spear. But no spear. Turns out Himmler went on a bit of a hot one and hid the spear so that he could use its powers to reform the Third Reich after Hitler's death. Obviously, it didn't work out. The SS officers gave in and they told the Allied forces where the spear was, and eventually after some time it was taken back to Hofburg Palace in Vienna, where it actually remains on display today. Studies done by metallurgists on the Vienna lance show that it dates back to around the 7th century AD rather than the 1st century AD. However, the metal nail that has been hammered into the center of the lance, which is supposedly supposed to be from the true cross, was consistent with 1st century nails used around that time. So we don't exactly know for sure who holds the real Spear of Destiny, or if there even is a Spear of Destiny. They say if even a false spear comes into contact with the one true spear, its mystique and powers are transferred over to it anyways. Maybe the real one's lost to history, or in a bunker under Nuremberg, or in a crypt in Cappadocia. Maybe the power of the spear was within us the whole time. Nah, fuck that. Magic stick, I'm gonna find it.